And we'll call the meeting to order at 4 p.m. Roll call. We have Roy Gott, Sandy Fortin, Mike Summerer, Ryan Sherby, and Tom Toll for the committee. And we have guest John Dougherty from Mission Broadband. And Crystal, is that Crystal Groff?
Yes, it is. I'm sorry, I had to figure out how to unmute myself. Thank you.
It's okay. It's been a while. I know we've seen you before.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, well, we have a quorum, so that's always great. Let's start real quickly with the minutes from May 23rd. Everybody on the committee get a chance to review those?
Yep.
Okay. Unless there is an objection, I would move that we approve the minutes from May 23rd as written.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, very good. Updates of action steps from a prior meeting. First thing we have is review of the June 13th outreach event. I thought it went pretty well. It was not as well attended as the first one, but it was still a good group, I think. And Mike, Sandy, why don't you lead off on any thoughts that you wanted to share on that?
I thought it was a good, enthusiastic group. They were asking more technical questions about how this thing might work administratively and politically than the first gathering. But Roy did a good job with answering questions. And the overwhelming consensus still is a community-owned nonprofit utility.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. I did not attend the April 26th. I was out of state at that time, but I thought this was a great turnout considering it's hard to get people to attend, and that was a really busy time of year for many folks. So a good turnout. I was hearing some questions in the background that maybe didn't come forward, more about the concern for having legal assistance moving forward. That was definitely a concern of folks understanding how are we going to get the two towns on board with a MOU or some sort of agreement. But that was never spoken out loud. I was just in the crowd hearing that.
Yeah. And then Ryan, you have joined us today. Ryan, welcome to the committee. Ryan approached me after the outreach with his business card, and he brings some very relevant perspective and experience to this process. So Ryan, can you go ahead and introduce yourself and your background?
Yeah, so bought a little cottage on Newman Street, kind of close to the Lob Store, early last year. Remote, almost walked away when I did the walkthrough a couple days before closing, but we loved Winter Harbor so much, I decided that running a fiber optic company was not enough, and that I would restore a 40s bungalow on top of that. So I did swing a hammer way back as I came out of college. So I kind of know what I'm doing. It's just been a while. So, but anyway, back in North Carolina, I run a fiber optic company. It's 100% fiber. We do wireless internet, fixed wireless too on some licensed spectrum. We were a middle mile provider. So we provided the transport to the internet service providers of the region historically until we got tired of waiting on anyone to deploy fiber. It was just your typical coax players, cable players on antiquated, assets. And so we got into the kind of last mile residential game. That's when I arrived at the company to negotiate the first fiber to the home development. I'm a cartographer. So I brought kind of map making to the table originally in my contract with the company. And then I guess showed that I could do a couple other things, and 5 years later, running the company. So we're a staff of 54. Got really excited when I heard that a broadband committee existed and was making progress. So I reached out to Roy. Actually, when I was buying trash bags in town, one of the selectmen said, "You need to meet Roy." I don't recall who it was, but I think he's the chief of police, if I'm not mistaken. But regardless, happy to participate and add value where I can. It seems like it's a little different up here in Maine than North Carolina, but the technology is the same. The math problem is the same. And that's where I focus most of my time, is trying to solve that math problem. So I did, historically with the company, I've did price estimates, PON engineering layouts, you name it. And I don't come from a telecom background, but it's pretty straightforward once you receive some basic training on how to connect dots and lay out lines and build service areas, et cetera. So look forward to digging in with the group. Hope I can add value. I've reviewed the RFP. It'll take me a little bit to get up to speed in understanding some of the nuances of what is trying to be accomplished here. But yeah, I'll stop there before I get too long-winded. It's late in the day.
All right, well, thank you again for joining us. And yeah, I agree. I think it was well attended considering the number of other things going on. We had a validation vote. There was a concert that night. So there was a lot of stuff going on. Middle of June is a tough time for things. So I thought it went really well, all things considered. And like you said, Mike, I don't see that there's any indication of a different preference from one group to the other. So I think that's a good sign that of the people who are invested in this process, they seem to be of a similar mindset. So there's always going to be the people who, well, the service that I've got is good enough for what I need, so what does it matter to me? And at the best, I hope those people will be ambivalent. I hope they won't oppose a project just for the sake of not needing a project personally. So we'll see how that goes. There were some questions from that outreach event that I did bring back to Down East Broadband, Dan Sullivan. There's a question about the availability of the network operator. And in their case, it's not that it's a single individual, it is his company, basically. So he has 24-hour response time that they work with this individual's business to handle the calls and response. So 24-hour response system for existing businesses, including the DBU side. So that was one question. So they only have Pioneer to service their needs right now for maintenance, but they've been very responsive so far, so that's good. And he says they're exploring other options to contract, but they're not there yet. But it's good to see that what they are working towards and what people are thinking about and contingencies are lining up. So that's good. As far as seasonal shutdowns, was that even seasonal shutdown? No, this was the question about reporting if existing utilities, I don't know that he read it the way I meant it, but they're not reporting as a utility what customers they have to the state. I would assume that there's probably no state required reporting. And he suggests that we can reach out to the MCA for that sort of information. Let's see. buyout of existing contracts and, seasonal rates or shutdowns. Those appear to be both ISP related issues, not exactly the level of the network that we're talking about. And he thinks that Pioneer may have some seasonal rates. But again, that's one of those issues that we could negotiate with a prospective provider. Sandy.
With the seasonal rate too, I think the conversation was coming up in about funding for, right? So as we put our budget together, we have so many people that sign off of their internet during seasonal. So if we're figuring that we're going to get $60 a month for 12 months, that's not necessarily the case because we have a huge summering population.
Honestly, I didn't hear it that way, but that's an important way to look at it as well. I'm not sure what the seasonal rate would be, and that would be something we'd have to. I mean, if they're going to keep service but just have it sort of turned off, I would expect it would at least need to maintain whatever level is required to pay back to the network. So
Yeah, okay.
in the DBU model, that's $25 a month. So.
Okay. And I think it was Peter Drinkwater that might have brought that up because he mentioned, oh yeah, sometimes we turn off service.
Yeah.
Just a.
And Peter, of course, was the one who he brought up about the buyouts as well. And again, I think that would be something that would be on a internet provider level, not the network level. But again, something that we can at least, when we get to that point, we can have a discussion with the internet providers, hopefully, who are interested to see what things are on the table, and we'll go from there. So Tim McAfee from Pioneer Broadband has told DBU there are no increases in sight, with his plan to move to a universal minimum of 1 gigabit for under $100 a month. So good that they haven't been dealing with any price increases. And again, that's another thing. Kendra Jo had mentioned that I don't know if it was Brewer, but one of the places that she was discussing was working on a 10-year price lock. So that would certainly be, again, something we would want to discuss when we get to any sort of negotiations with internet providers. And this really wasn't a question as much as a statement. And Dan says work with Mission Broadband and MCA. So there we go. And they've worked with Mission, I guess, on the Eastport RFP, according to him. So, and then I just had one follow-up question, which was about what was it that was required to authorize the interlocal agreement. And he said it was a regular council, I assume city council meeting. So that might not, I'm guessing it will depend on the municipality. But in their case, it doesn't sound like it was a town and citywide vote to approve the interlocal. So that's what I have for follow-up from the June 13th outreach. Sandy has a question in chat. What was the population of your community in North Carolina, Ryan?
It's complicated. It's a regional network. So we go into East Tennessee. We're in Western North Carolina, west of Asheville, and North Georgia. So we don't deploy service in all of those towns, but we might provide middle mile transport or sell dark fiber or et cetera. It's just such a massive geography that it would be a nightmare to try to provide quality customer service at the size that we currently are.
All right. The other thing I have on here is review of the expenditures authorized from last time. Of course, we still have the Zoom overage of $8.89. That's taken care of. The outreach event refreshments was a total of $124.25 this time. Printing and mailing, I don't have that information from the town offices yet, but if there's anything in place, I'm sure Alita will be able to communicate that to you, Sandy, when you do your check-in there. Meeting Owl 3 and accessories, 1366.94. And then the informational one pager. Did you get the bill on that one yet? That was the initial run.
No, so the very first one for 50 copies, I think it was, or 100 copies, I think Dan may have just taken that one under his belt, Dan
Okay.
Demerit. That was an
Okay.
initial. But I just had the 1,600 copies that I sent you the amount for the 900.
Yeah.
Um,
I think it would be worth having a vote on the 1,600 copies for the newsletters. What was the amount again? Did you have that handy?
Hold on a second. Let's see. Oops. I've got to go through my emails, so it'll take a minute.
Okay. I don't have anything specific for Gouldsboro or Winter Harbor that won't be covered later, so we'll blow right through E and F there.
754.72.
754.72. So that is for 1,600 copies of the same one pager that was included in the Gouldsboro and Winter Harbor newsletters. Is that
Correct.
okay?
That's correct. Yep, two-sided high gloss. And
Okay,
it's 4 pages of the slide deck, basically.
okay. So if it's okay, I would like to get a motion to approve that expenditure.
Move approval.
We have a
Second.
second.
Second,
Who was that?
Ryan.
Ryan, okay. Motion and second to approve the 1,600 copies for $754.77 of the informational one pager to go into the newsletters for each town. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstain? Very good. Okay, information gathering. I know, John, you are limited on time, so let's, is there anything, RFP progress with Mission Broadband, anything that you wanted to highlight on the RFP draft?
Just whatever you guys need. I don't know what Jeff has talked about in the past, and I apologize. I know I recognize Sandy. I was the when I was working. We still have Hancock County project going on, which I can brief you on as well. But I was at some of the original broadband committee meetings to try to help you guys get it started and get it kicked off. So this is amazing work. Thank you. I give you kudos for the work that I've seen at this point. It's really good.
You're at,
Really good.
you're at fault. You recruited us.
I did. I did. And so, really, just give you a quick rundown of RFP. So, through the years, what we keep hearing back, and specifically in Maine from the providers, because it's especially more so now, it's pretty straightforward for them, I'll say. Although we want some of the detail is, ours were far too technically complex at times. And so they asked us to simplify because it's, Ryan, you mentioned it, it's a design, right? And if you're one of the providers, you've got to pretty design what you want, and you can do a couple of options with that. So what we've tried to do is kind of pull out some of that and say, okay, here's some parameters that we're trying to hit. They know what they're going to do, especially in Maine right now, especially the groups that's going to go to this. So you probably see some of that in here where it's kind of simplified. I call it simplified compared to some of the other ones we used to do. And then let them kind of desktop engineer it and design it and say, okay, you got to meet these parameters. And then at the end, like if there was some specific stuff, I think you guys might have had, it's like, we prefer X, but please let us know how you're going to deliver it. Right. Those types of things. And certainly we'll put stuff like that in there. So I have not been through it since the latest revision But again, I'm always cautious, gonna say, hey, it's your RFP. Right, we're gonna manage it, but it's your RFP, but we do try to coach it to a point where it's, reasonable for the folks that are gonna respond, because we pretty much, we know what their networks are, we know what they can do. We have been surprised over the last year with some different players that come in, so that's always good news when there's progress and not just a rubber stamp response, right? So that's good. So anything you guys, want specifically in there, again, a couple of the examples we put, insurance will be needed. Another one we definitely references themselves, right? You don't need a reference, from 6 or 8 people to look at it the first time, right? When you narrow it down and say, okay, these are the 2 or 3, give me some references. So it's just those things, trying to help people respond to the RFP in a purposeful way that says, here's the detail we need, right? Some of the other fluff stuff we don't need as much, and we'll get to that if we choose you. So that's a quick rundown of how we look at RFPs today.
Okay. Sandy, I don't think this draft that Jeff sent out includes your work on the executive summary. So that is something that,
Saw that email. Yeah, let's get that in there.
yeah, so that's something that needs to be added in. Jeff had a question about the total number of locations to which service was needed, which, I mean, he had, let's see, it wasn't even in this one. It was my personal email. Any case, he had the residential units and the residences and those pieces of information from the census data. So that's a little piece that we need to see if there's a better number available from the towns, but I'm dubious that they're going to have a number that they can just pluck out of their data that says this is how many locations there are. So we'll work on that. I provided an estimate on road miles, which we can go over here in a little bit. And the other piece that Jeff had asked for was requirements on posting an RFP in the towns. And Winter Harbor says they've never done RFPs, but this is what they do with bids, and this is what they would expect for that. So being that they're close enough animals that they would need, in the public notice section of the newspaper, brief summary, copies available at the town office, contact the RFP administrator, and the committee reserves the right to accept or reject any or all received proposals. And I asked Eve in Gouldsboro the same thing, and she said that works for them. So straightforward, that part is easy to do.
And if you guys, depending on where you want to post it, we put it, on our website, and then we can share the link, and you can put the link wherever you want to do that.
And whether we post it on our website or we just put the link to where you have it, I personally, my computer science background, have the thing in one place and point everything to that.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's my feeling. And they've Gouldsboro also offered to put it on their website and so forth. So
good.
So that part seems to be pretty straightforward. And let's see what more I have.
So I do want to, before I drop, and I think this next meeting is only going to be an hour. I don't know, you guys, my calendar says till 6, so I can come back if you think you're going to be beyond.
I hope we're not here until 6.
Okay. Well, my next meeting starts at 6:30 with the town, so I'm good to go. So I wanted to start the conversation, and we can further it along. I think you guys are headed in the right direction. My concern is timing of this grant round. And want to talk a little bit about the bead money that everybody's heard about yesterday, or Monday, whenever it was. So MCA, and we can get Kendra Joe back on one of these calls as well, is very adamant after the last grant round that folks have everything in place. So that includes not just your MOU, but if you're gonna be a, a DBU, what are all the bylaws and everything else that has to be in place?
Right.
And the funding is the key piece, right? So obviously MCA is a piece of that funding, but where's the other stuff coming from? And that has to be secured in order to apply for the grant.
So let me just give you the briefest rundown of what I've just started working with, and I'm going to
Okay.
be meeting with the select boards next week.
Okay.
Winter Harbor on Wednesday, Gouldsboro on Thursday.
Okay.
I'm going to bring, and maybe this is, if you can provide some sort of any information you can provide on this is helpful, but try to present to them a list of the steps that we need to do. So we need to have the interlocal agreement in place. We need that authorized. We need their permission to basically do that. We need to set up the nonprofit. We need to get the RFP posted and as soon as possible, because that's already going to be a little bit of a tight time frame. We'll know what the deadline is when the proposals are going to be evaluated.
Mhm.
And I think at that point, we also want to have had special town meetings scheduled so that as soon as we have a proposal selected, we already have something on the docket to be able to take out and go to meeting, communicate, spread the word, and have a vote to authorize the funding, the borrowing for that. And in that way, and I know we like to hit the beginning of the application window, but I know that sometime in mid-September is the closing. And
Correct.
Jeff said there's really no advantage to getting in earlier, getting in towards the end. So I'm really sort of leaning towards the end to
Sure.
just give us that time to get in, because I think if we can, I know it's a small round of funding,
Yep.
but it's, according to Kendra Joe, it's the most flexible, more
Yes.
flexible than BEAD.
Correct.
And so if we can get in under this one, my hope is that we'll get more out of it than we would as BEAD funding.
Yep, yep, okay. And so just, and again, if there's bond, something has to be bonded, all that has to be secured.
Right.
Financially before before MCA would accept
The application.
the application.
Right. So I know that's a tight time frame for the next basically 3.5 months, but
Yeah.
If we can do it, I think it's worth doing.
Yep, okay, good. And we're with you.
Okay.
Just,
Does
Uh,
that sound like an appropriate list of steps that need
it
to be
does.
on-
And I'll look for some general ones, and maybe Kendra Joe also from MCA has,
Okay.
this is, you guys are on the first round of us working as a contractor for MCA for towns. Typically, we work directly with the town, so, yeah,
Yep.
I say that because they also have resources, and I want to make sure I
Sure.
take advantage of those.
Sandy?
Clarification regarding the nonprofit organization. Does it have to be specifically a utility nonprofit organization, or can we use a fiscal agent to get started?
Well, I think if we get the interlocal approved, then I think it makes sense to go ahead and start the nonprofit at the same time, because the nonprofit is specified in the interlocal.
Okay.
And I think, I could be wrong, but I don't think for a basic nonprofit, there's a particularly high bar, it's tremendous amount of work. And to the point that was made earlier, we do have the documents that DBU used for their bylaws for the nonprofit and for the interlocal agreement. And I've adapted a version of that, and we'll go over that in a little bit. But so I think there's a lot of work that's already been done that can be simply repurposed.
Right, I think so too. I think that you're right there. Yep. And just a quick update from a Hancock County perspective, because that project is still ongoing. And so I think it'll be important, and I put it, I say that Schoodic Peninsula is working on a project, so they are with a couple of things going on there. So they are still looking at, funding, but they're the commissioners. And so they're like, okay, we've been doing this long enough and we can put this money elsewhere and blah, blah, blah. So we the project continues. And I want to get in front of them, you know, that the seriousness, if you will, that if this is this grant round and this is good information to have, I won't be at next week's meeting, but I'll be at the second one in July. I can put a number to it, right? So they've kind of allocated kind of ARP money, if you will. So they'll ask me, okay, what was that spreadsheet? And so I can give it to them, and I can give it to you guys as well. As soon as I'll do some homework on it. And then second, the other thing that we're doing with the commissioners is we had the idea of, okay, for all these, not necessarily you guys, if you look at your broadband map, you got a lot that's not served, right? You kind of unique, what's kind of a unique thing that's left, I'll say, in Hancock County. So what we also spoke to them about is how do we fill all these kind of gaps and holes? So one of the things that we're going down the road on and working again with MCA to make sure it matches is to do a countywide RFP and, you know, see how we can fill in some gaps and some holes, and just give them, once MCA determines what that map looks like for unserved. And this would be BEAD money, right? This is next year. It's going to take, it's a big effort, but just to give you an idea, when you hear about it, I don't want you to be surprised, because I don't want it to interfere with the process that you're making right now. It would really be two different things.
Okay.
And with
Very good.
that
Thank
said, any questions that come up, and also, we may be able to, there's a other person that we work with, that has been through the DBU thing. The broadband utility district. So Bud, I should say, more than DBU, or Bud. And she may have some insight. And so we may just bring her into one of your meetings or have a separate phone call fairly soon. And, you know, tell this group or some of you what she went through and what they went through.
Okay, sounds good.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. Good seeing some of you again.
Thank you for joining
You
us.
folks, Ryan, I'm really curious about your company, so we'll talk someday.
Sounds good, John.
All right, take care.
Mhm.
All right. So we have the draft RFP here. We can go over it right now. I don't think there's a lot of technical level stuff in here that's not really anything that we need to work on right now. I don't know. So executive summary, like I said, that's a large part of Sandy's doing work on that. I have passed on a request to Jeff to, if anybody recalls, when we talked with Tim McAfee from Pioneer Broadband, who built the DBU network, he advocated for a centralized split as the term that I think he used, as opposed to distributive split. And Axiom and Consolidated both had some splitting in the field going on. So I just asked Jeff to incorporate language that we would like options for centralized and distributive, just so we could have some comparison. We can sort of pick and choose based on what the project cost ends up looking like. Because the less splitting we do in the field, the more capacity we have long term. So I thought that would be an important option to have in there. I gave Jeff the estimated road miles, which comes out high. It's not different from what I had said at the meeting. Unfortunately, it's pretty accurate. So I would just encourage people to, there are limited sections of the towns where underground facilities are used to provide. I think that's left over from the Eastport draft right here. Any underground stuff is private in Gouldsboro and Winter Harbor. I think that's left over. But in any case, does anybody want to go over the RFP in depth right now, or do you just want to sort of mull it over and then email questions and comments to the group?
I vote for mulling over privately. I think that trying to edit as a committee of 6 is going to be.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And so I would say just go over it as quickly as you are able and get any questions and comments back to back to the main, the Gmail account, and then we can pass those on to Jeff if they're not easy to be answered already. So we can have this all bundled together pretty quickly. So we will close that one for now. Road miles, this is 2 afternoons of my life here. Actually, morning and early afternoons, I should say. Spent with very close quarters with Google Maps and estimating road miles. Basically anything, as we've discussed in the past, the goal is any basically utility pole that carries one or more services for at least 2 customers, 2 distinct customers. It's not a rental property belonging to somebody else on the same piece of property. So 2 discrete landowners, property owners, that sort of a thing. This is road miles to get to them. This is not necessarily which way the utilities go. This is just the road. But I think of this as sort of a worst case scenario. And then at the bottom here, all the little roads that are basically driveways for a single customer, or they're so short that you can get the utilities right off the pole along the main road. So that sort of a thing. And it was even worse earlier because, the 0 and the 9 are very close to each other on the keyboard. And so there was one of those that turned into a 9 that shaved a little bit off. But this, using the metric, any of these needing to be served roads that are 0.1 miles or longer gives us 75.6 road miles in Gouldsboro, plus 0.8 miles to get out on Route 1 in Township 7 back down Gouldsboro Point Road. If we use the baseline of what Pioneer's terms are with DBU, which I would hope we might be able to negotiate similar terms, their first 1,500 feet are included as a drop. So when you go from the existing utilities to the home, they include the first 1,500 feet. So if we do that, 1,500 feet is about 0.28 miles. So I just took out here anything that was 2.2 miles or greater. That drops it by about 8 miles in Gouldsboro to 68.3. Township 7, again, there's that spreadsheet. Winter Harbor, this is exclusive of the Schoodic section because that's its own weird kettle of fish. Same metrics, 15.3 miles, done the same way here, obviously much smaller. If we up that to the greater than 0.2 miles, it drops to 12.5, which is actually what Winter Harbor reports as their total number of public road miles. Though I'm not sure these are all public roads. So 12.5 and 68.3 on the low end gives us 83.8 or something like that. I'm not don't trust my math, but in any case, that's a lot of road miles. And as Jeff said last time, using an average of $75,000 per mile, that's $6.25 million of approximate network build cost. Ryan was saying how in his area that most of the construction is underground and that's usually about 80,000 a mile. So I feel pretty confident or comfortable with using the 75,000, considering almost all of our work is going to be above ground until you get onto those tiny private roads where there might be some local money, private money involved. If it's one of those long driveways, that's sort of on them. And that's because, again, if it's just one person being served over those utility poles, they chose to live 1.5 miles down the road. That's a personal choice. And so we can't be trying to cover everybody because like I said, there are a ton of those private driveways right down, a lot of them on West Bay Road especially. Uh, Let's see. Sandy, if there's no ledge to blast through, that's always a very, very, yes, we know there's a lot of ledge here. So that's the road miles situation. Schoodic is, we have, oh, Bob's here. I didn't even notice you come in, Bob.
Bob finally got his new laptop working and having,
Okay.
funny, having issues with Spectrum. I killed cable TV today. I cut the cord. They cut everything.
Well, that seems like not you operator error, but a them operator error more
Oh,
than a
yeah,
technical one.
Yeah, they killed, I'm on the phone with them. It's like, you just shut down my internet. Why
Yep.
did you do that?
Wow.
Did you? Yeah, because everything is done via a console today. You
Yeah.
know, they just input the work order, what they want to do, and
Mhm.
was disco request, but just for cable TV. But I'm back up in service. I'm dealing with the Chinese. They've been really pushing it. And yeah. By any chance, was Jim Guest on today?
Jim Guest did not join us that I've seen.
Okay. Okay.
Um,
Well-
so, uh,
It's good to be here.
well, it's good to have you in. Did you just get here or did you get here a few minutes ago?
I'm sorry, say again?
Did you just arrive or were you listening in for a little while?
Actually, I've been listening in for a little while
Okay,
and finally got the audio going. And so,
I was making a note here.
yeah, no,
Uh,
saw all the route miles on it. My only feeling is that we're all single threaded. You know, was redundancy, well, you're not gonna get it on area. And even if you string two routes of fiber, you still have one telephone pole to deal with. I just have my reservations on that.
mhm.
I've always designed my networks with redundancy and alternate access egress, but
And that's something I know I've seen in the other examples of the RFPs that we've seen, and the Mission Broadband does, I'm pretty sure, have a request for redundancy in the network.
hmm,
So it'll be
as
like you said,
far as like there's a couple of types of redundancy. One is the physical redundancy. The other one is like different central offices. The
Mhm.
only one we really have is coming into Ellsworth and then Bangor. So
Yeah.
those are the only choices. We are very, very rural. So
Mhm. So just continuing on the road miles here, this is the Schoodic part only. It could be either really easy or really difficult, I'm sure. And a lot of that depends on what the National Park Service says we can or cannot do. They just replaced all their poles a couple winters ago,
mhm.
or not even necessarily winters, but a couple of years ago, they replaced all their poles, and the contractor and Tom, yeah, I should have shared this file with you, but if you're having trouble accessing it, if I didn't, I will share it again. Just I'll reconnect with you after the meeting. So their poles were just replaced a couple of years ago. The contractor couldn't really get themselves organized in time to take advantage of the winter. So what they ended up having to do was bring in mats to prevent disturbing the vegetation in the ground underneath the equipment to replace the poles. And it was a huge ordeal. And Consolidated likewise couldn't get their stuff in gear. So all of the telecommunications, the fiber, the old copper telephone lines, as Ryan has observed, are lashed to the poles. They are not mounted properly, and they're just going to sit there and chafe until something breaks, and then somebody will go do something. So the problem is really mobilizing something along this 2.6 mile stretch that runs through the woods, up over hills and rocks, and nowhere that there's any sort of road access. And the thought that occurred to me, and this is something that maybe Ryan will have some specific insight into, is we have the water tower on campus, which has been used for a cell transmitter. And I'm wondering if there's a place that's got decent enough line of sight that there would be a possibility of a wireless, fixed wireless link that would prevent us needing to go over that roughly 4.5 mile distance with fiber, as long as it's reliable and has reasonably enough capacity. We're making do with 40 megabit fiber over fiber right now, consolidated. And we said we're paying $600 a month for it. So if we can get gigabit, we'll be flying high. It doesn't matter how it gets there.
Well,
So,
for that shot, they usually do microwave.
Yeah.
You know, that's how it's done. And you may have some environmental factors with the microwave.
so I think that's something that I know. I've sent this file to Jeff, and hopefully he will include some of that nuance in the drafting of the RFP as well. But I hate to say this because Schoodic Institute's where I'm from, but if it doesn't make sense to include them as part of this project,
Mhm.
to get a project through, I'd like to find a way to do it separately down the road. But if we have to yank it out for right now because this is just not feasible, then that's what we do. But it's included in this file for reference. So
Hmm.
anybody have any thoughts on the road miles as shown here?
It's great. It's how we quick quote fiber builds typically. So well done.
Anything to move it forward, basically. So I don't have anything else under information gathering. Communication plans. Select board outreach. I mentioned I'm going to be at the July 5th Winter Harbor Select Board meeting, and I will be at the July 6th Gouldsboro Select Board meeting. Anybody who wants to join me is welcome to do so, but what I'd like to do is basically present that list of steps and timeline for this project this summer, this, as I keep calling it, very ambitious timeline, and see if we can get the support from the select boards separately. I will bring this draft interlocal agreement unless if there's anything that anybody wants to tweak on this, absolutely, we can tweak it. This is basically Down East Broadband's interlocal agreement that I have modified to fit our towns and the expectations that, or the hopes that we have going forward. So it sounds, I can't really tell with their document because it was modified subsequent to its initial adoption, because they added the town of Alexander, at which point the nonprofit was in existence. For us, the nonprofit isn't in existence, so I've tweaked it to say that this document, they shall create a nonprofit utility. I've called it Schoodic Broadband Utility, not to clone DBU too much, but you know, it's simple, it's straightforward. We don't need to come up with a fancy pharmaceutical sounding name for it. But I'm not wed to any language here, but it's just really to try and duplicate that. And if it's something that the towns can get behind and can agree to, then it just makes it that much simpler, I think. Have people had a chance to look over this document yet? some yes, some no, maybe. So it's all pretty similar to what they had written before. I will say, this distribution of non-tax revenues and reserves section, basically it describes revenue that is received. First, you take what you need to operate basically, and any remaining revenues. This I did tweak to just be clear, will be distributed first to the municipalities in the amounts equal to and as needed for the repayment of municipal borrowing for the building of the network. So if there's a, let's see here. Okay. If there's, you know, a $25,000 payment per month in Gouldsboro, or however it works, whether it's a bond and whatever the payment schedule is, if it's 25,000 in Gouldsboro and it's 8,000 a month in Winter Harbor, that they get those amounts respectively on the schedule, assuming that money is available. And then anything beyond that, if there, Down East Development Corporation apparently contributed to Down East Broadband in some way, shape, or form, and there was an expectation of repayment there. I think all of this money that we're hoping to get is not with the expectation of repayment, so I don't think we'll have that. But I left language in there in case there is some other entity that makes a contribution that has the expectation of repayment. And then let's see here, up to, okay. And third, the balance distributed to the municipalities according to what I call the revenue return formula described in this agreement. And I said on at least a quarterly basis by determination of the board of directors, just so there's an expectation of a schedule of when payments will be made. I don't know if that's standard. I don't know what DBU's model is on that part of it. I just threw it in there to have a starting point for discussion. Disputes and resolutions. They had arbitration in Machias, and I put it Ellsworth. I assume that Machias, I think Machias is the county seat in Washington County, and I assume that's why they chose Machias. So I put Ellsworth as the county seat for Hancock County. Admission of new members. This is all pretty much the same. They did not have termination of the agreement as a separate heading. It seemed like a significantly different enough subject to be separate from admission of new members, so I gave it its own heading. Withdrawal, filing of agreement, and effective date, all pretty standard here. This is where it sort of diverges the most. This just lists the entire project cost, and I've broken it out. Costs that are associated specifically with each town, and costs, for example, telecommunications buildings, central offices, things of that nature, that would be, might be joint between the two, that you can't really directly separate. And again, that outside contribution, if any. What I've put here, because I can envision people feeling strongly both ways. And again, this is a starting point. Any additional revenue to be returned to the communities or joint costs when we're assigning that here. 50% in accordance with each municipality's basically percentage share of road miles, and then 50% per capita. Because, for example, Gouldsboro has a lot of road miles, but they have more road miles disproportionate to the way that they have a larger population. So it's attempting to balance the amount that's expended to build the network and the maintenance of the network with the number of people utilizing the network. So I don't know if that's something, and it's sort of similar to how we do the school funding, where there's a percentage based on student enrollment and there's a percentage based on valuation, which is the state's estimate of your ability to pay. So anybody have thoughts on that sort of formula?
Hey, Roy, if this network goes out to the Schoodic Institute,
Mhm.
is the federal government going to be an entity in this?
I
Like,
I would not expect them to be. They are basically a property owner within the town of Winter Harbor, technically. It's their land, but it exists within the town of Winter Harbor, and it's again, it's not even Schoodic Institute. We're just basically the tenant on National Park Service property even. So
I guess is the question that we would increase the mileage for Winter Harbor if Acadia National Park is added in, because it's
If-
now considered Winter Harbor mileage, right?
right, if this, for example, if we're running fiber all the way through that corridor, then that would be added to the Winter Harbor road mileage. Now, it's 4.5 miles, so it's not going to shift the calculus very much. If it ends up being a wireless solution, then I would say it's not so much that it becomes a road mileage thing as much as it becomes part of the network cost in Winter Harbor. But we could certainly look at whatever the proposals are. But I would see it impacting Winter Harbor's totals as it physically exists in Winter Harbor.
So John, that circuit's already there, right? Through,
There is a circuit already there.
yeah,
Uh,
so the entity, whatever it ends up being, could get a type 2 circuit. And just have that as an adder. That's basically leasing the fiber. Or IRU or type 2 circuit or whatever type of arrangement the telecom would allow for. We'd be stealing the customer, but it would prevent the cost of overbuilding fiber that's already there. Right?
So, well, I'm just curious. So speaking from the perspective of knowing that Schoodic Institute is paying $600 a month for service right now, would you expect that they would lease us capacity on their circuit for less than that?
No idea.
I mean, it would seem to me, and it's certainly worth approaching them about this.
Yeah.
Because like you said, if we don't have to build it again,
Yeah.
I mean, it's still going to be running over improperly installed fiber right now.
Yeah.
I have no problem approaching them, and if that's a feasible solution, then even if it's a decrease, then certainly it makes sense. If it's the same or more, then there's no advantage to taking it on.
Oh.
And we're the only customer out there basically besides the national park. And
I think it's more, Ryan, I think it's more of a technical issue. You're correct with the type 2. Where would the handoff be? Yeah, it would have to be somewhere consolidated and
Yes.
our equipment.
Which the network would pass the consolidated PUT, right? So
Yeah, I mean, for them, it's just to get increased bandwidth, just lighting more colors of the spectrum. That's it, you know? So you said we got 40 meg coming out there?
well, 40 meg is what we're paying for right now, and we're paying $600 a month for.
Wow.
We've got more. They will sell us more, but if the idea is to make it available and make it affordable, it's a ridiculous price that we're paying right now, but it's
Sure.
literally the only thing available.
Right, well, yeah, they got you by yeah. Okay,
they're probably selling you a DIA circuit, which is dedicated internet access. So it's not shared. It's not, it's not being split or carved up or oversubscribed or whatever the terminology is.
Mhm.
But so we have this situation where we have a large customer, they're getting a gig. That's all the entity can physically provide them by a limitation of their network and electronics.
Mhm.
Whereas if I lease that circuit back to the colo space where I'm co-located with that telecom entity, I can sell them 10 gig or 100 gig. So the customer is saying, we need more than 100 gig, or we need more than 1 gig. The current provider says we can't do that for 4 more years. So we step in and we say, well, lease us, give us a circuit lease on that fiber, and quote it to us, and we're going to steal the customer because you can't deliver to the customer.
Yeah.
So either we're
Yeah.
going to overbuild you and take the customer, or you're going to have some revenue coming in off your
Mhm.
circuit, or your assets are going to lie there underutilized. So I
Mhm.
think there's
Yeah.
some games that can be played to try to leverage.
Well, right, well, you don't know too how old that fiber is. Now, you have old fiber as compared to newer fiber. And if they're not doing DWDM, they're right with the limitation of equipment, so I mean.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
may
I'm-
be pushing the 1 gig limit.
Yeah.
With they never really invested a lot in the network,
Yeah.
so.
Well, and I, not making excuses for them, they're a corporate entity. They've got a lot more resources than I have. But they've also, the northern New England region has been a hot potato for telecommunications as far as the phone company has been concerned for a while,
Mhm.
since Verizon decided it wanted to get out of the area. So it's been uneven, and there's been some development, but it's been very uneven, and they've had a lot of changeover. So
Yeah.
does this formula,
I think it's great. I
Yeah.
think it's yeah.
does that make sense to people? You understand why it's this way and
Yeah.
seem to be fair?
Seems to be fair to me.
Okay. So what I would like to do, if anybody's going to have any comments, put them in here very soon. And I'm going to present this to the towns when I'm at that meeting. And it occurs to me, we had talked about using this or Get Ready Connect money for this, but we don't have to worry about that. We've got close to 7,000 or more, $7,500 from the previous grant money. And my thought is, if we can get this to the select boards, they can have their lawyers look at this, offer any feedback, and then they can bill that earlier pot of money that we have for that legal consult. And if it passes legal muster and the select boards approve it, that gives us the go-ahead to proceed with the rest of it, to do the nonprofit and go from there. Does that make sense to people?
Well, yeah, I just have one reservation, and we have some new members
Mhm.
on the select board.
Yep.
So I wonder how amiable they might be to like say, hey, we need to get funding or fund this. They may even shelve it.
Well, and that's why it's part of the whole presentation, not just the interlocal. It's the steps that we have lined up this summer. It's the RFP.
Mhm.
It's the get the proposal back, figure out what the cost is, submit an application for grant money to assist with the cost of it, and
Right.
explain the model and how this is designed to pay for itself. And ultimately, in my mind, the end thing, if we don't get grant money, we probably don't move ahead with this project until we do get grant money, because I'm not a big financing guy, but $6.25 million
Mhm.
divided by, let's just say 20 is 312, say $313,000 a year before any interest or whatsoever. I'm just going to round that up to $360,000 a year, because that's 30,000 a month we would need to bring in to be able to pay for this network. And right now, DBU, which has 1,000 customers, is bringing in $25,000 a month. So to me, the math doesn't work without taxation support, which we don't want to have to do.
That'll
And
never fly.
it would never fly. So if the project is that big, that expensive, we need grant funding to move forward. So, and they would need to have the understanding that we need to do all these things to know if we're going to get grant funding. And then if we don't get grant funding, we have to sort of wait until we can
Mhm.
to move forward. So that they're not feeling like they're committing to expending money that doesn't exist.
Right.
And that's going to be part of what my proposal, my speech is, my presentation.
Well, it's a selling job. We gotta sell this to them.
Yep.
Right now, and Sandy can bear witness to this, is that, yeah, they're trying to take $1 million, what town of Winter Harbor is trying to take $1 million out of their, I guess, their investment fund to pay for road repaving.
Mhm.
Until I brought up the, this grant money available. And I was like, there is? I mean,
Mhm.
they were very surprised.
Yeah.
And then to go with this, on a bright spot, I believe the federal government has released $60 billion more for internet access in in rural communities in the United States.
I think this is what John was alluding to earlier, but I heard about 223 million, I think, that Susan Collins had secured for the state for the expanding broadband. So,
Mm.
so I think
mean,
that's, yeah.
by freeing up more funds can make it more attractive, but I think, excuse me, stay tuned for more information.
Yeah.
On that.
Sandy?
I would just say that if we could vote on this today, Roy, I would
Mhm.
recommend that our committee would authorize up to that $7,000 to go towards that legal fee for the towns. I know in Winter Harbor, I feel like that would be a selling point for them to know that they don't have to deal with the expense if it's already pre-approved when you're going to them, for one. Secondly, the $1 million question is definitely of a concern, and where those funds are coming from and asking for grants. So I did drop a note in the interlocal agreement about the verbiage around grants is going to be really important. At this point, under current management, I don't believe they have capacity to deal with grants and the management of that financial portion of it. So that's going to be part of the pushback I see happening there as well.
Mhm.
So the grant, you're saying they don't have the towns of Winter Harbor and Gouldsboro don't have the capacity to write a grant? Is that what you're getting at?
No, I think Gouldsboro has the capacity and interest in doing it. My experience has been that it's not been, typically Winter Harbor turns down the grant line because they actually have this investment fund. It's
Okay.
not true that they cannot apply for grants. Like the community resilience grant, they can apply for it. They just have chosen not to because they just have this bucket of money that they prefer to use. So
Right.
it's that kind of
Then,
the conundrum.
They don't, right, they don't have a grant writer.
well, and
right.
that's the good part is that for the current round of MCA funding, and I'm sure the BEAD funding as well, the RFP specifies that the provider selected will be basically, they'll be doing the grant writing basically for this. I'm pretty sure is what I saw in the RFP. So it's not going to fall to the town specifically. And that would be an important piece, I think, to communicate on this presentation as well, that you don't have to go find this additional funding. What we just need is when we get to this point to have a vote to authorize the borrowing, because that's what MCA needs to have. We need to authorize the borrowing up to the total project amount so we can then go forth and apply for the grant. If we never borrow, no harm, no foul. But it's been authorized to show that the MCA that we have the support of the community, at least to get to that level of applying for the grant. So, yeah, we can definitely touch on that in the presentation there.
Okay, I just have some reservation about that.
Reservation and that it will not be successful,
Well, I
or
think- excuse me, I'm so sorry. I think again, it comes down to a selling job on it.
Mhm.
Where the onus could be placed, theoretically placed on the town to pay off the debt, that's gonna meet a lot of resistance. A
Yeah.
lot of resistance on that. I don't think so much for Gouldsboro. Because Gouldsboro has nothing but Winter Harbor.
Mhm.
They seem to have different ideas.
No, I understand that. I've experienced that, and I actually meant to do this. This was the list of attendees at this most recent one, and you know, obviously there were some repeats here. Roberta Parrott and George McLaughlin, they were at the earlier one. Doug Wetterhall, Peter Drinkwater, Sheila Smith, obviously yourself, your wife, Bob,
Mhm.
Marie Trois or Trois.
Choice.
I really want to say it in a French way, but that's my heritage speaking here. Ruth Littlefield, Ryan Sherby, of course, Arthur Schroeder, Rick Brown, Joanne Brown, and Schoodic Arts for All.
Right. And you
That's
could
that's
take-
a
Go
it's
ahead.
it's a good list of I mean, it's a good percentage of this group that show, obviously we were in Winter Harbor.
Right.
But I mean, there are definitely people that are concerned for this project in Winter Harbor. And like you said, Winter Harbor is not terribly served majority wise. And that's a good thing for the people of Winter Harbor. But there are some people that are still underserved. And yeah, you're right. It's a selling job, and we have to be forthcoming that if we do go through this process and we do begin a project, if the take rate is not there across the entire project, then there is the possibility that there could be some tax money that is called upon to pay those payments until such a take rate is achieved. And that's something that we have to be transparent about, but it's also, we'll be doing that take rate estimating. That's part of that RFP process and that later application process. So there's always, once we know whether or not there's grant funding, that's when we pull the trigger that there is a project or there isn't that happens.
Right.
And I think as long as everything up until that point is exploratory and all it costs them is the time to have a couple meetings this summer. And I think that's another key piece, but you're right. They may shut it down. And then we have to, if Winter Harbor does not want to proceed, then we
Mhm.
have to really think about where we're going to go.
But the point is, this is really our best and only path forward that we have to sell to these folks, explain to these folks, and support. We don't really have a plan B at this point.
Mhm.
I'd like to back up to Sandy's motion that we authorize as a committee payment of legal fees if required for the two select boards to have a legal review of the proposed agreement.
Do we want to set a cap on it? I mean, we know we're pretty comfortable with, we've got a $5,000 in there, just to have something in there that we can, I don't want to spend 5,000, and I don't think it's going to be anywhere near 5,000, but
Mhm.
for this document. And we may, if we want to do that, we may want to send them the bylaws for the, I don't know that it needs to be, but bylaws for the nonprofit. If they're reviewing, does it make sense to include both at the same time?
I don't think it would hurt. And I'm okay with approving at least the $5,000 at this point.
Mhm.
I think that's a good offering to really help kind of set the bar with them. If there's an understanding that we could come back to the committee for possibly a higher increase if that's necessary.
Is that,
I'll go with that.
so somebody want to make a motion to authorize legal review by both towns in the total amounts aggregate up to $5,000?
I'll make a proposal on that
A second.
as the wording as stated.
Okay. Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I think, Roy, total transparency,
Mhm.
is what's needed,
Absolutely.
and the good and the bad, and let a judgment come down from there if they
Yeah.
want to proceed. And we're
Absolutely.
being open and forthright.
And like I said, it's all exploratory up until the point of we've got the answer about grant funding. That's the point of no return after we have that, if we decide to move forward with the project or not.
Mm.
They have, they're not committed to anything until that point. So hopefully they will, if we're paying for the legal review of these documents, if we're carrying our own weight, as it were, hopefully there's no reason for them to say no, because it doesn't hurt them.
Well, that's it. The town doesn't want to have that exposure. Winter
Mhm.
Harbor doesn't.
So, all right, so I will, did I hear somebody?
John, this is Ryan. I've got to excuse myself from the meeting. I have a family obligation at 5 and I'm getting several text messages stating such.
All right,
So,
well, thank you for joining and we'll be in touch.
okay. Thank you, everyone. Nice to meet everybody. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. So the other thing that I have on here is outreach event 3, which is just preliminarily wanted to discuss this. Any thoughts?
I think the first two were excellent. You
Okay.
gave a great presentation on it. People understood it. As far as feedback goes, they loved it.
Yeah. I was thinking that we could possibly shoot for Peninsula School as a location, just because it's a joint facility that serves both towns as much equally as possible, given their disparate populations. It has good facilities, and I may have an in with the people in charge of it. So
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion, Roy, and I would highly recommend we get our select board member or town managers to that meeting
Mhm.
to move forward with this, if at all
Yep.
possible, so if they can have some input in available dates. I think we're at that point where they've got to be participating.
Right. And I mean, both towns sort of operate on an every other weekly basis, I guess. So they're both in lockstep right now, the 5th and the 6th. So if we pick an off week, then I would hope either night would be permissible to them. We're past town meetings, we're past all that. So hopefully
Hmm.
it's a calmer time.
Roy, when is the date that you want to go to the select board meeting that you picked? I'm sorry.
Next week, the 5th for Winter Harbor and the 6th for Gouldsboro.
The 5th. And you want to do it at 6 o'clock, I guess. Or
Well,
6:30.
I assume that's when they start, and so I'm just gonna show up when they start and go from there.
Okay.
I'll plan on being there. They also have the road infrastructure and road commission committee being formed next Wednesday.
I heard it was gonna be a busy meeting, but, you know, I think with our time being limited, we have no option. We can't be choosy about it at this point.
You probably have good attendance, so I think it's good that you attend this one.
More importantly, I think we have to get on her calendar. and get in
I've
touch
already,
with-
I've already spoken with Kathy. so
Okay.
She knows to expect me.
Okay. Well, I'll be there with you on the 5th.
All right. Let's see here. So does anybody, obviously for all of the expenses, I think we could do $200 again for refreshments, probably. I don't think we're gonna see a larger crowd than we had before,
Hmm,
but it's hard to say.
at the last town meeting, you had a good crowd. You had a good crowd,
I'm
but I mean, that
thinking,
was,
I'm
a lot
thinking
of
the
that was
outreach.
banking. You had the folks from Bar Harbor Banking and Trust. But you have a number of townspeople as well. So,
No, I'm just thinking, compared to the previous outreach meetings for the third one, I don't know that I would expect to have more people show up at number 3 than either 1 or 2.
no, I would hold off on the sandwiches and just get pizza. Everybody loves the pizza.
I don't know, the sandwiches did pretty good too.
Yeah, yeah.
I guess we could do just pizza. Yeah, that pizza went pretty fast this time.
Yes.
But I would think we could authorize 200 again for refreshments and just bring water. And whether it's pizza only or, you know, who knows, maybe just do pizza only. It's
Yeah, I
close.
mean, keep it,
So do we want to just authorize right now 200 for outreach 3 refreshments? And I think that'll be everything we need.
Well, that sounds good. A motion to $200 for the food for outreach 3.
yeah.
Is that a second, Bob?
Yeah, I'll do,
I-
who did the second?
That was Mike.
Oh,
That was Mike,
Mike,
wasn't
okay.
it? Okay. All right. Motion in a second, $200 for refreshments for outreach 3. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye,
Aye. Thank you. And then I will reach out to superintendent and see if we can plan on Peninsula School as a location for that. And whatever, we'll look at the 2 select board calendars and make sure. I would like to do a Wednesday again. I think that would be easier.
mhm.
As long as it's one of the off weeks for the select boards. So perhaps towards the end of July. Or we could do middle of July. But we'd be talking, if it's Wednesday, so it's either the 12th or the 26th.
I probably think the 26th might be a little bit better. I mean, people, you're looking at the heaviest, that week of 4th of July is the heaviest vacation period.
Mhm.
And did you say the 19th is not an option? Oh, wait, never mind.
There'll be a meeting.
With the
Yeah.
meetings, yeah. Right.
Any other feelings? I mean, this isn't going to impact the other work that we've got going on. This is just more communication and community outreach, obviously, but anybody have a,
How quickly the towns do a legal review of the proposed arrangement.
Mhm.
There would be a potential second select board meeting for both towns before we would have this.
Hey,
meeting.
how are you?
Get
I'm on
more
a call.
information, but
Yeah.
potentially more information on the 26th.
Now, very good. Bye-bye.
Great
Sorry.
suggestion. I agree.
okay. Yeah, I don't know if you heard that, Bob, but Mike suggested if that depending on how much time it takes for the lawyers to review the interlocal and the bylaws, that we might have more information to be able to share on the 26th. So does that work for you, Tom?
Yes,
All
sorry.
right. No, that's okay. So why don't we
Personally,
pencil in the 26th of July as, let me look at my calendar right now. Just in case. I don't think there's anything conflicting, but I don't have anything on the 26th right now, so that works for me. So we'll plan on the 26th Peninsula School. We've done it at 6:30.
Hmm.
So I think that time works for a lot of people. So,
Andy's point, do we want to try to get one or both town managers there?
oh, Kathy has been not subtle about wanting, not being happy about not being able to attend the last two meetings. So I said to her specifically, I'm going to have one of these meetings so you can attend. So Kathy will be, I hope, in attendance. I will run this date by her before we set it in stone as well. And I will let Eve know, I'll let both select boards know when I present to them that this is our plan. And we would like as many of them as possible to attend if they can, especially if they haven't already. So,
Just an FYI, the Scudic Arts for All Festival is going on that week, and I don't know if they have any events scheduled for that Wednesday or not. But you might want to check that calendar.
Usually have a concert on the evenings.
Scudic Arts
Either
for
at
All.
Grove Park or at Hammond Hall.
Let's see. Calendar. Well, it's trying to load. Sitting on waiting for Google Analytics, so I will look at that calendar and then we'll go from there. But hopefully it's, I mean, that's the
July.
problem. There's going to be something going on somewhere for everybody at
Yeah.
that point in time.
The calendar is showing July 26th, the Roland Rust at Scudic Arts for All, Hammond Hall.
And that's a concert.
Mhm.
All right. If it's a, let me pull up a different calendar and see what our board organizational meeting for RSU 24 is.
Do you think it's possible to actually have an earlier meeting? I know we've been doing the 6:30s, but I wonder. Judging by
It's-
the
it's-
audience we've had so far is seems like older, maybe not coming out of work.
Well, that's the thing, is to try and make it a dinner accessible thing, provide food for people so they don't have to think about dinner. So it looks like there might not be any meetings for RSU on the 25th. So we could do the 25th instead. Is there something on Scudic Arts for All calendar for that evening? Because it still hasn't loaded for me.
Yeah, it's not showing anything for the 25th. Their other events were the 23rd and 29th.
Okay, well, in that case, do we want to say the 25th instead of the 26th, that Tuesday? Which again, should not be a conflict for the select boards.
Works for me.
Mhm.
Okay.
That looks good.
Tuesday, 7:25. And all right. That is what we will plan for. And if I do get sandwiches, I'll just get the tray of the bigger sandwiches, not the finger rolls again, because the bigger sandwiches definitely seem to be more of a draw. So maybe one of those, and then, 3 or 4, a couple other pizzas. Not everybody wants pizza. I do, but
Oh,
so, okay. So that is communications, other business. Anybody have any other they want to address?
good.
Okay. Next meeting I have tentatively set for Wednesday, July 12th at 4 o'clock. And we will finalize anything that we can at that point, and I'll have been in front of a couple select boards at that point. We will have some sense of whether this moves forward or not.
Well, yeah, we'll know. So
So-
July 12th at 4 o'clock.
July 12th at 4 o'clock on Zoom. And Sandy,
Just one other point, as we're reporting in on the Get Ready grant, we do include in-kind services. So if any of the committee members are spending time doing stuff for the committee, if you could just let me know by email, or the actual document for our tracking is Q2, that's in our Google folders. So it just helps that we're tracking some hours that you're contributing to. It helps to offset what funds we're using. So it's just kind of keeping track of, like, Mike, I wrote down that we were at the outreach event and participated in supporting that event. So it's just a couple of hours that we did some participation outside of the committee meetings. I haven't been using the committee meetings, but I don't know if that matters.
okay. And I think all the expenses that we have, the only thing that's really out there is what the towns have to bill us for. Everything else has been paid for so far.
And there shouldn't be any mailing cost with the newsletter. That was a free insert because we're part of the municipality. So there was
Right.
no label for a mailing fee.
We'll have another mailing charge with this next round, because we'll send out another thing for this third outreach. And I don't think, does anybody think it'd be necessary to do a fourth one? I think 3 is probably, I mean, maybe if we see a big turnout, then there'll be more people that we could reach, but
What I would also put out there, Roy, like Mike and I did for Goldsboro when they had a reaching out, part of their Goldsboro Shores and sort of comprehensive planning, Winter Harbor comp plan, we're looking at doing a similar thing, and it may be sometime August or September. So we may
Okay.
have an opportunity to table at that event as well.
okay. Well, and August or September, we will have a very good idea of what we're going to be able to accomplish.
Mm.
So, all right.
Yeah.
So I will work on getting a document out to the town offices once more about an outreach similar to the other documents, and we'll go from there. Next meeting Wednesday, July 12th at 4 via Zoom. And it is 5:34. Does anybody wish to make a motion to adjourn?
Moved.
So moved.
I'm gonna call that Mike and Bob.
Yep.
All those in favor?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for your work.
Have a good night.
You too, Roy. You too.
Bye.
Take care,
Thanks.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.